Hello, everyone. Welcome to the number one fish tank podcast on the face of the universe, the Tank Talk Podcast. I'm joined by John, my wonderful partner in crime here. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Today, we're excited. We're really excited about this one because what are we talking about today, John?
We are talking about YouTube and the impact that YouTube has had, positive or negative, on the hobby of fish keeping.
And we're going to approach this from a lot of different angles. It should be interesting. And even if you're not somebody who is doing YouTube, trust me, this applies to you as well, because we're really just talking about how has YouTube impacted our hobby of fish keeping, because it's a lot different from when I started posting on YouTube in 2017. It's a whole lot different than when you started posting. What was that, 2013? When did you start
2012.
posting?
First upload was May of 2012.
And you just looked it up right before the podcast. YouTube has only been a thing really since 2006. You said December of 2005.
Right.
So it's a platform that is relatively young. I mean, really, you've only got the Gen Z who grew up pretty much with YouTube their whole life. Everybody else, there was a moment in time where YouTube wasn't a thing in their life. And for us, the vast majority of our lives being Gen Xers, an awesome generation, I will add,
the best.
it wasn't even around most of the time. So imagine a time when YouTube wasn't even a thing. Got your information from other people live and in person, or books and magazines. So YouTube has gone through a lot of changes. Even though it is a platform that has only been around now for not even 20 years, I would say it's a very mature social media, right? I mean, because it's been around for so long, there's videos out there that it still strikes me as a little bit crazy when you look at some of the videos, whether it's fish keeping or not, and you're like, this video is 14 years old. You're like, holy cow, that's really something. And it's changed a lot over time. And the question we're trying to wrestle with today is, has it made our hobby better, worse, indifferent? Obviously, there are some things that are good, but there are some things that are really bad. And we're going to approach that subject as we go through today. How would you say YouTube has changed from the time you started posting videos until now?
Oh boy, it is night and day. I don't think anyone in 2012, I started consuming fish keeping YouTube content in 2009, but I didn't start uploading. I created my account in 2011, started creating in 2012. I don't think there was anyone back then that looked at this as something that could potentially be a career, or something that could drive a business, or make money in any way. Like, when I started my YouTube channel, I didn't realize there was monetization to it. I didn't know that this is something I could actually get a paycheck from down the road. You did it, like, for me, my motivations were to advertise my business. KGTropicals.com at the time, now KeepFishKeeping.com. It was merely a way to show my fish and stuff like that. I never looked at it as a business opportunity, like its own business. The content that was being created back then was very raw, very unedited, just kind of whatever you get out of the camera kind of thing. And it was people sharing their hobby. And then you had people that were at more of the advanced level, like a Joey, King of DIY, who was Waru Joey at the time, was creating like tutorial videos, which was like, wow, this is like I'm watching the Discovery Channel, but it's on YouTube. This is crazy. It's just a completely different world that when you were describing Gen Xers, we grew up, most of our life, YouTube didn't exist. What we have right now is what we were 30 years ago dreaming of having. Like, can you ever imagine having access to all the information? And now we have that, and I think we take it for granted. But even within the lifespan that I've been on YouTube, it's changed drastically. I mean, there's so many more creators, so much more types of content out there. It's just a different world.
Yeah, and I remember too when before I was a creator in 2017, early I think February 2017, I would watch videos. You were out there, and a few of the others, and it was a very organic thing. It was like, here's what I've learned, here's what I've done. Let me share it. And the idea of having top rate visual and top rate audio it wasn't there yet. Even as far back as 2014, 15, when I started watching a lot more YouTube, at least related to the aquarium hobby, it wasn't the primary concern, the valuetainment aspect of it. And not a lot of people were doing that. Some people had it. You look at Joey, he's always had that ability, right? You had that, you haven't had that early as well with your ability to engage an audience way back in the day. And I think that's what made your channel, Joey's channel, so successful over time. But it wasn't the primary driver. And it's interesting now to see how things have changed. People ask me all the time, and I'll give you an example, like one good example of how YouTube has changed what we do in fish keeping. I get two questions a lot. Question number one, why don't I write a book on fish keeping? Because I actually have published lab manuals in biology and microbiology. So it's something I've done. And I've edited those publications as well. So I could do that. And the second question is, why don't I actually, being a biology professor, why don't I actually develop a course in fish keeping, like an adult continuing education course, something like that? And my answer is always the same for both. It's pointless. And the reason it's pointless is because of this, YouTube. If we think about, I know it sounds nice. Oh, I'd like to have a book in fish keeping. I'd love to have a course that you could go to for some people. But why? What YouTube has done in fish keeping, it has commoditized information, which means it is ubiquitous. It means it's everywhere and it's free. We all do this. I work on motorcycles a lot. That's my other hobby. And every time there is something, my buddy just had a problem with his bike the other day, and his shifter linkage is all messed up. It's loose and it's getting ready to fall apart. And what did I do? I went on, I watched I didn't reach out to a mechanic. I didn't talk to a bunch of people from some of our riding clubs. I went on YouTube and I found somebody who is an engineer who works on motorcycle engines and knows a whole lot more than most people do, and some really good how-to videos. And I put 3 or 4 of those videos together, and I'm like, okay, guess what? Now I am not an expert, but I understand how shift linkages work, how to tear them down, how to put them back together. It's not hard. It's not hard at all. But what size are the sockets and the things that you need? And it's the same thing with fish keeping, right? Pretty much everything you need to know about fish keeping is already out there, and it is free. And video is the most convenient way to learn, right? Having that visual, it's one thing to read it in a book, but then we all struggle with, okay, I'm reading it in a book, but how does it look? What does it look like when you do? What does it look like when you have a sick fish? What does it look like when you have an algae bloom or cloudy water? The book can tell you, right, in words, okay, this is the things that you would do. But then you go out and you search YouTube, and you might find a dozen videos on cloudy water. And by the way, some of those videos will have a different reason for the cloudy water. The cloudy water will look different. The approach to solving it may be different, where the book's probably going to give you, okay, here's a couple ways to deal with it. If you want to take a class, that's fine, but you're spending a lot of time and money that's not necessarily convenient. For what reason? Most people who take courses want the credential, right? They're not really there to learn, and you can do it for free on YouTube. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is now information is readily available at your fingertips 24/7, 365 days a year. But that also comes with some problems. And I'm sure you've seen it over the last 10 years or so as well.
Sure, over the last 10 years, yeah, but I've seen it very recently. We talked in last week's episode about the issue that I had with my pond. I had the dreaded early pond algae bloom. Pea soup is what the pond people call it. My water was green. I committed the cardinal sin, and it's something that we're probably going to talk about a lot in this video or in this podcast. I watched one video and I decided I like what that guy had to say, and so I'm going to do what that guy said. And I'm not going to say what channel it was. I'm going to be honest with you. I couldn't even tell you because I don't remember. It was the first video that I watched. I don't remember the channel's name. I watched it. And basically, everything that he said was wrong. But I followed it, and I wasted an entire day out there wrestling with my pond. And a week later, my pond still, my pond looked better for about a day, and then it just gradually got worse and worse. And a week later, it was right back where I started. So, there's a lot of very bad information out there. And I can't even say that I've never put bad information out there. I'm sure I have. I've tried my best not to. I just share my experiences. But yeah, there's a ton of bad information out there too.
And that's something that you have to guard against. We talked about this, maybe a month, 2 months ago, when we were talking about what makes somebody an expert in fish keeping. If you haven't seen that podcast, check it out. It was awesome. We really went into the weeds on that one about what makes somebody an expert, but it can be frustrating. And one of the downsides, what YouTube has done to the hobby is, yes, it's given us a lot of information, but it's also, in a sense, overwhelmed people with information that may not always agree from one source to another. And sometimes that's completely acceptable and necessary, because there can be different causes for the same problem, right? And so you might have, like in the case for your pond, maybe that guy who said to do all those things was, yeah, he was dealing with an issue and it happened to work for him, but what he didn't maybe explain, or didn't think to explain because he didn't think it was relevant, is maybe the situation was different. And the reason it worked for him and not for you could have been completely just a victim of circumstances. Or maybe he just had no clue and said, okay, well, this is what I did in a fish tank, and now I'm going to try it in a pond and just do this. It'll be fine. And never actually tried it on his own to see if it worked long term. Right. And so that's one of the problems that we have now in YouTube is, when we look at, information has been commoditized. There's a lot of info out there. Clearly that is a nice thing, especially when it is free. But then how do you trust the information when there is so much out there? If you were to type in just about any topic in fish keeping, if not hundreds, if not in some cases, thousands of results. So I'm thinking, I did a video on it, how to breed angelfish. So I don't know, I'm sure you've done videos on angelfish. So I promise you, if you were to type in how to breed angelfish or how to care for angelfish, there would be hundreds upon hundreds of videos that would come up in your search. And there are going to be some variations. And I get this all the time. So if we stand this angelfish example, what size tank do you need? And I constantly am still to this day fielding questions. Hey, I've got 3 angels in a 20-gallon. Can I add in? I had somebody the other day, and this was a new fish keeper. And so I want new fish keepers to ask these types of questions. So this was a great question. Hey, I've got an angelfish. Can I add a discus? I think it was a discus to my 20-gallon. And all I said was, hey, listen, you know what? For me, the very minimum size that I feel comfortable keeping discus would be a 90-gallon because it's tall, but I would prefer a 6-foot tank. And for an angelfish, I'd really like to have a 55-gallon because, again, it's a taller tank, more space in terms of how many. You're always safe with one. The more you add, the more complications. But this person got this information and asked this question because there were a number of videos out there that said, hey, you can keep an angelfish in a 20-gallon. When they're the size of a dime or a nickel or a quarter, sure, you can keep angelfish in a 20. It looks perfectly fine when you first buy them from the store. And these are smaller fish and you're putting them in a 20. It seems perfectly logical. And because they're smaller, they're not fighting with one another yet. They're not breeding. And then wait 6 months until they get a little bit larger, a little bit more assertive. They are cichlids after all. And they start trying to carve out a territory for themselves and possibly their mating partner. And then the next thing you know, you've got a big problem, not to mention the fact they're starting to get a lot taller, bigger bodied, and that could be an issue. And so one of the downsides to YouTube and what it's done to the hobby is there's a lot of information out there, but there's nobody curating that information. I'm not necessarily saying there should be a person out there curating it, but that's on us now.
Yeah, but you know what? You're 100% right, but there's also sometimes it's the viewer's fault too. And here's what I mean. You can do like I did, which is hear what you want to hear and then move on. The guy that did that video, I don't think it was a bad video about the pond algae. I think that he probably explained it the way it needed to be explained, but I just didn't get that far in the video. I saw what I wanted to see, and I said, okay, now I know exactly what I need to do. That also applies in your angel example there. if you're somebody that's looking to determine what size aquarium you need for angels, and you see a video, even mine, I did a 7-part series with my friend Dave Warren on breeding angelfish. If I, in that video, you see us saying it's perfectly fine to breed your angel pair in a 20-gallon aquarium, breeding them in there. They're going to do their thing. You're going to put them back. I mean, that's not what Dave recommends and not what I would recommend, but you can do that. If you're somebody that's all you hear, you didn't hear that I said you're going to temporarily put them in there, let them lay their eggs, and then move them out. And you're really only doing that in the circumstances where the parents won't do the right thing to eat the eggs or whatever. So you're putting them in, excuse me, you're putting them in there to isolate them so that they're contained. They do their thing. You put them back in their tank. But you heard, oh, it's perfectly fine for me to put angels in a 20-gallon tank. Yep. So, in that situation, I think it's kind of, it sounds really harsh to say, but it's kind of the responsibility of the viewer to say, okay, that's some information, but that's not necessarily the information that I needed. It's just what I wanted to hear.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to get multiple opinions, multiple perspectives. When I use the not aquarium related example with the motorcycle thing, I watched 4 videos, and those 4 videos were all from people who have a pretty substantial background. And there was a lot of consensus there in terms of what you do and how to handle these situations. And we always recommend that as well for fish keeping is you're looking for, all right, where are the parts that are similar for the people who have the most experience, the most success, and have been doing it a long time, right? And that will give you a better feel for, all right, what advice is actually good advice. And so it is really up to the viewer. You have the free information. You are going to be inundated with that information, but now it's up to you to try and come to a consensus with what you're watching and make sure that, let's face it, if you've got somebody who's got 50 years of fish keeping experience and they've bred tens of thousands of angelfish or thousands of angelfish, and they've kept them in all different types of community tanks and different sizes, most likely what they're telling you is going to be more reliable than somebody who just busted out a phone, busted out a little lapel mic and said, hey, I got this 20-gallon with angelfish and it's been working great the last 2 months. These are my first angelfish. Isn't it great? We have to be more discerning. We have to understand that video is going to have very little educational value relative to somebody who's coming out and saying, hey man, I've been doing this for 50 years. And here's what you can expect long-term. And so there's a lot to be said. And we mentioned this in that podcast I referenced earlier about having the experience over long periods of time and over many different situations. And that's going to give you a better result. The other thing I want to talk about, and I want to hit on with this is, when we talk about how YouTube has impacted the hobby, you mentioned early on, it was more about people just sharing their experience. What have you seen more? And I've seen this too, especially over the last, certainly since the 2020 event, I'm seeing a lot more of that shift. And I'm sure you have too. What shift have you seen more of in the last, certainly 4 years?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is people chasing views rather than actually giving out information. And I can't say that I'm not guilty of that myself. I can definitely go deep into the explanation for that if you'd like me to, but I think that it's what YouTube has evolved into now is opportunity for a lot of people. And I'm certainly not meaning to sound like a hypocrite here, but a lot of people look at it as I can do this, I can get all the views, I can be the next Joey Mullen, and I can make $1 million. And so they make decisions based on what they believe people will watch rather than whether the information is good information. Basically treating it like a business, which you need to do, but maybe going a little bit too far with that and not necessarily caring about the information, more what's going to cause the biggest stir that's going to get more people watching it. And it works. It works 100%. There's been trends that have traveled around this hobby over the course of the last couple of years, which are disgusting. And I can't say names because it's horrible, but I don't feel like starting a war. But It's amazing how fast trends can start from somebody that's doing something purely just to get attention and get views.
And unfortunately, one of the things that happens in YouTube is in our hobby, especially, and I think all of YouTube, we're all prone to this. The more views a video has, we tend to offer it a little bit more credibility. The more subscribers a content creator has, we tend to offer that a little bit more credibility when that has absolutely nothing to do with somebody's credentials or credibility. You might have someone who's got 1 million subscribers. You might have somebody who's kicking out videos that are getting 250,000 views every single time and know very little about what they're actually talking about. I recognize some of those trends as well, whether it was putting fish that were far too large in a vase or a wine glass or something like that, or people sending goldfish down water roller coasters or something like that. Absolutely just stupid things to do. And yet people watch this and think because, oh, well, this creator's got a lot of views or they've got a lot of subscribers, this must be an acceptable and fun thing to do. And so I'm going to do it too. And again, we're talking about the impact it's having on the aquarium hobby. And this is having a direct impact on fish health. And it's one of the things that you do on KG Tropicals, I try to do on Primetime Aquatics. And that is we try to educate people so they're keeping fish in a healthy way, in the proper way, so that they live a long, healthy, and happy life. And when you see videos like that, YouTube, again, there's nobody curating this stuff. I suppose that yes, if a video got enough complaints about the mistreatment of animals, that possibly YouTube might remove that video. Excuse me. And I think they have in some cases, but for the most part, a lot of that stuff still remains, and it can definitely have a negative impact on the hobby. And then we're left fielding questions like, hey, how big of a, can I put my, excuse me, can I put my betta in a wine glass? And the answer is, well, it'd have to be a really big wine glass.
Yeah, and those trends are definitely out there. And it's, I mean, I hate to be this guy. You're sitting here looking at two 50-year-old gray bearded, well, yours isn't all the way gray, but guys, old men, get off my lawn. But a lot of times it is the young people with all the energy, and they're actually falling victim to what I talked about earlier. What is going to get the most views? Sending goldfish down a water slide is going to get a lot of views. And guess what? It did. It worked. It got a lot of views. And you have people like us that are like, well, that's ridiculous. How is PETA not shutting this down? And, the one time we want PETA to protest something, they're not doing it. But then most people are just entertained by that. And that's unfortunate. I mean, that's a completely different style of content than what you and I do, but it's out there. There's also, there's YouTubers that put out their methodology and they put it out there as if it is sacred. And then you start seeing people follow that. And it's not necessarily horrible. I mean, there's several examples of this. It's not horrible information, but it's also not the best information for the everyday fish keeper. But yet everyday fish keepers are picking it up all the time as if it is gospel. And, those people are setting themselves up for a world of hurt. So, yeah, it's tough. I don't know how else to say.
It is tough. Yeah, because you see these trends, and the trend that we could use is the filterless aquarium, right? And you've got people on YouTube they have a lot of experience with filterless aquariums, and much of what they say makes perfect sense with the ecosystems that they have set up. And unfortunately, what happens is people don't watch the full video. They don't recognize how the tanks are being stocked. We talked about this again a couple months ago on a podcast, and they try to carry that through, and then they're asking, hey, I want to do this filterless aquarium for my Mbuna tank. I want to do this filterless aquarium for my Oscar tank in a 75 gallon. It's like, well, that's going to become more problematic. And you also have to recognize that in some of these filterless aquariums, they don't always look the best, right? So if you're going for a certain look, be careful here, because it's not always going to be the look that you want. It can still work, and the fish aren't necessarily unhealthy, but it's probably not going to be something where you're looking at this aquarium like, wow, this is awesome looking. I really love this thing in my living room, let's say, as a display tank. So we just have to be really careful there. The other trend I think that is, it just is, and I contribute to it. I recognize that every single day, and that is the short format that YouTube has now really pushed to compete with things like TikTok and Instagram, and Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels. And I can, like I said, I participate in that to a certain extent, but usually the way I use those formats is to direct people to longer format videos. So hey, if you're interested, oh hey, you like this fish? Do you think it looks cool? Here's a video on how to actually care for it, because the shorts format being less than, what is it, a minute, you really can't get a whole lot of useful information in a minute. As much as we would love that with our short attention spans, it just doesn't happen. And I know you've got very special feelings about the shorts format, so I'll let you chime in as well.
Well, I mean, I don't have anything against the short format stuff. I fall down that rabbit hole all the time, and it's very entertaining and it's interesting. I do have a problem with it when it comes to fish keeping. I think you set your cut yourself short there when you described participating in that. I don't think you are at all. You're participating in creating short form content, sure, but you're not participating in the problem. There is a major problem with the short form content, and that is the people. I did a whole video about this. The people who present themselves as an expert, and maybe not an expert, but an experienced person in this hobby, and in 60 seconds they put out this information that's the worst possible information anybody could ever give. But with those slow or short attention spans, people just scrolling through, they see that, they think it's okay, and they go with that, and they kill a lot of fish. Which is why I'm going against what you said. What you're putting up as short form content on the Primetime Aquatics channel is just as educational as your long form stuff. It's just a shorter version. Very well done, by the way.
Well, thank you.
It is. I mean, it's good stuff. The information that you're putting in there is valuable. But here's the worst part, and I'm not saying this to insult you, because it's the exact same way if I put it up on my channel. Those shorts don't get any views. When
Yeah.
you look at what some of these other people are doing that are putting goldfish down water slides, and you know they're getting millions of views, and you get 10, 15,000, which, hey, that's fine. That's nothing. And so the good information is getting no views at all, while the ridiculous stuff is getting all the traction and going viral and all that kind of stuff. So that's the problem that I have with short form. But as a
And
content form itself, I don't have a problem with it at all. I fall down that rabbit hole all the time.
And you brought up a really, really good point. And I think this is one of the things that we have to be careful of when it comes to YouTube and how it's impacting the fish hobby. And that is, you and I, as well as a number of other people that we know and are friends with, we put out more educationally based content. What we're trying to do is make the hobby easier for people, help them avoid common problems, help educate when it comes to certain types of fish and types of stocking and different types of aquariums, that kind of thing. That is not the high impact type of video on YouTube. It's just not. I have never once put out a video and hoped it would go viral. I know what I produce. I do not produce viral videos. I never have. I probably never will. And if I do ever produce a viral video, it will be on accident. It will
By
be a
mistake.
mistake, because it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, what I hope is that people watch the channel just like you watch, people watch KG Tropicals, and they're finding value when they need to have questions answered. What's happening now, especially in the last few years, we talked earlier in the podcast about how YouTube is a relatively recent invention, about 20 years old or so, but it is also a maturing social media. And in order to get the views, the viral views that you're talking about, whether it's short form or whether it's long form, especially in the fish keeping niche that we're in, which is very small, right? It is a very, very small niche when you compare it to other types of video content.
Micro.
You have to do something that's really different. And sometimes to do the things that are different are to do things that are less than ideal for the health of the fish and may border on just really bad advice. And so yeah, you can do these things that are quite unusual and then wind up with a situation where you've just influenced, oh, my video got 1 million views, or my short form just got 1 million views in a week. But usually that's because something is very different. And if it's different, is it is it beneficial to the viewer long term in terms of how they are doing fish keeping? Is it beneficial to the fish keeping community as a whole? If that answer is no, well, yeah, you got a lot of views, especially if it's long form. You have a video that does 1 million views, you could make some decent money on that video, but at what cost, right? And so you have to balance that. And I think that's what a lot of YouTube content creators have to do. They have to figure out, okay, what am I really doing here? What am I after? I always said from day one, from 2017, when I started the YouTube thing, I wasn't thinking about money. In fact, it wasn't even me that wanted to start. It was my two boys when they were young. Oh, you've got the fish room. You should do a YouTube channel, and you could do it because, you're a teacher and all this stuff. And finally, after them bothering me for probably close to a year about it, I said, okay, fine, we'll do it. We came up with the name, but I never intended to. If you look at the first videos, like first one I ever did was just, here's my fish. Second one, I started immediately on the education thing because that's what I thought would bring value. And the first videos were horrible and the quality got better over time. But I don't know at this point, and I try to be aware of, imagine if you were a new content creator now, most of the content is out there already. It's hard to admit that, and it's tough to say, but most of your care videos for fish are out there. Your stocking ideas are out there. Water parameters have been done ad nauseum. There's nothing, almost nothing new to add to water parameters. So as a new creator, what are you left with? Well, you're left with your personality, right? The personality of the creator, and trying to figure out what hasn't been done yet, which is really tough to do. So to get those videos to get any views, I was watching, I don't know how many of you know who Michael Saylor is. He was the CEO. I don't know if he still is the CEO of MicroStrategies, and he was doing something in a financial YouTube channel that I was watching. He's a crypto guy. I don't necessarily agree with him on all of his crypto views, but he said something that really stuck with me. And it's, to me, it's 100% true. He said, as information becomes more commoditized, as you're able to educate online and social media, especially via YouTube, there is absolutely going to be a place 10, 15 years from now for the top 5 banjo players in the world. I don't know if he used banjo or guitar or horse riding or whatever, but he said there's going to be a place for those educators. There's going to be a place for those top 5. They're going to get millions of views. Everybody who wants to figure out how to play a banjo are going to go to the best in the world instructors. There might not be a place for the 15th best or the 30th best or the 50th best banjo player. And I think that is something that translates into almost every niche, is how do you get views nowadays when you've got mostly what I would consider to be a completely saturated YouTube. And YouTube is saturated in most niches, right? And especially in fish keeping, because you've got a lot of creators putting a lot of stuff out there. But what's coming out that's new, and what's coming out that's not only new, but valuable? And that can be really hard for new creators. And so if they want the views, they want the recognition, they want to start up a YouTube channel. And like you said earlier, the motivation now is possibly different than it was before, because you've got an entire generation of Gen Zs who want to be social media influencers. It's like one of the main jobs that people want to do at that age group, high school and lower, and even entering college now. I want to be a social media influencer. Well, that's really hard to do when you don't have a ton of experience in life and or the hobbies that you're going into, and you're trying to figure out how to get the views and how to become an influencer as a career. And that is in an area where social media is more and more commoditized and saturated. That can be tough.
Yeah, you mentioned how you started and what you started with. Mine is very, very similar. I mean, in fact, it's almost identical to what you said. My first videos were showing my fish, and then it became the first series of videos that I did where I actually showed myself on camera was a series on breeding African cichlids. And that was the main reason why I did that, was because I had gotten so many emails and comments from people saying, how do you breed those? And what I wanted to do was create a series of videos talking about that I could just refer these people to, rather than having to type it all out or copy and paste and all that kind of stuff. That was the whole reason why my channel got going. And I had, I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years ago. I had an epiphany as a content creator. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. That really changed everything for me and kind of made me settle down and understand where I'm at and where I'm headed and where I'm going to be. And I think it's good advice for these new people that you're talking about, that I want to be an influencer and I want to be in the fish keeping world. I had the epiphany that I'm never going to be Mr. Beast. I'm never going to be Aquarium Info. I'm never going to be Mark Rober. These people that are the elite of the elite. There and yes, I put Aquarium Info in there
Oh,
because
100%.
the content that her and her husband are doing is absolutely unmatched. Uh, Different type of content than what we do, but that's a conversation for another day. I'm never going to be that. What I am is somebody that educates new fish keepers. That's always been my whole thing. I don't go super deep into the science like you do. It's like the way I look at it now, it's like when you're just getting into this, you're just starting to fill up a glass box full of water, come to me. And then when you start to understand what you're doing, go to Jason, because he's going to have that next level of education for you. And I'm fine with that. I that's where I am, and that's where I'm always going to be. And I'm not, if I'm making a living doing this, I can't consider myself a failure because I'm not making viral videos. I'm not Mr. Beast. I mean, that's insane. I'm never going to be there. And I think I've never had this conversation with a young person, but if a young person came up to me today and said, you know, do you have advice? What should I do? I would tell them just that. Understand, I don't care if you look like Chris Hemsworth and your wife looks like Emily Blunt and you're the two most charismatic people in the world that knows everything about fish. You will never be Mr. Beast.
Right.
Because our community is just way too small for that. You can be successful, but you're never going to be them. You have to understand that going in, because otherwise you're just always going to consider yourself to be a failure. Once you can grasp that, then you're going to feel better about it. And I saw a video. I wish I had no idea I was going to be talking about this video today. Otherwise, I would have tried to remember the name. There was I went on my analytics, and I don't know if you ever go to the mentions section where people, other channels have mentioned you. And there was a young lady that did a video, my top 5 favorite fish keeping channels on YouTube. And she was very particular to say, this is not in order, this is just the top 5. The first one she talked about was me. The second one she talked about was you. And of course, by you and me, I mean me and Lisa and you and Joanna. And she described it exactly like I just did. If you're new to this and you want to just the absolute entry level stuff, KG Tropicals is perfect for you. And then when you move up to Primetime Aquatics, you get a lot of that entry level stuff too, but they take it to another level and they go with, because Jason is a professor and he's got a degree in biology and all this. And she described it so perfectly, like that. I wanted so badly to just hug that woman, because it's like, this is what I want. This is perfect. I don't even know why I'm talking about all this right now, but this is I guess it's all about understanding your place where you're at, understanding what it is that you're doing, and understanding that you can be successful without being Mr. Beast or Paul Cafaro, or because you probably at this point, I don't know that there's people that are gonna be the next Mr. Beast. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's already been done.
Yeah, and there can be a new Mr. Beast, but not the way Mr. Beast does it now. It's going to be a new idea. It's going to be fresh content. It's going to be a spin on something that could have been successful, that maybe somebody missed a few key details. But in fish keeping, again, you mentioned Aquarium Info, and we've gotten a chance to talk with her a number of times. She actually doesn't live far from me. I've been able to talk to her a number of times. What they're doing is insane. Her channel, their channel, basically take the next top probably 20 YouTube creators, at least top 10, combine all their stats and all their subscribers, and they're not even at that level. I think she's almost at 5 million at this point, but they're doing something extremely different. I had a young guy at Aquashella this at Dallas a couple weeks ago and asked me, hey, do you have any advice? I'm just starting on my channel. I said, well, be unique, right? And offer value. And that's, I mean, it sounds, people ask that all the time. And I know they ask you the same thing. And it sounds like such a generic comment. It's like, no, they want specific things like, we'll get this camera and get this audio and upload at this time. And I'm like, no, you got think media for that kind of stuff. In our fish niche, the things that you have to do is be yourself, be unique, and offer value. And if you put something out there that does both of those things, yes, does the quality need to be good? And I think that's one of the things that has really changed about YouTube as well. When I started, even 7.5 years ago, there wasn't necessarily an expectation that you were going to get the highest video and audio quality out there, right? You weren't going to get TV show level
Right.
production. That expectation has grown quite a bit. And I know for me personally, when I'm looking at videos, I will choose every time the one that's got better video and audio quality. If the information is the same, right? All else being equal, I'm going to choose the higher quality video just because that's what most people want, right? If you're having a hard time hearing what somebody's saying, if the video looks like it's straight out of 2010, maybe that's not going to be as popular. But that creates another issue for us in fish keeping, and that is what's not talked about enough are when you create videos, as those videos age, even if the audio and video quality was sufficient for the time, even if the information is really good, as they age, they get less views. And so you see a lot of creators taking a concept they did 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago and basically redoing that video. And you might be thinking to yourself, why are they doing that? They literally, I remember this video from 5 years ago. Why are they doing it? Why? Because they're taking a video that used to get a lot of views, that's since died or puttered out, right? Just kind of petered out, redoing it so that it starts to get a lot of views again. And I think part of that is human nature, right? If we're looking at videos, even if one's got more views, but it's 8 years old, we tend to think, all right, that information is 8 years old. Maybe there's newer, better information from this video that's only 1 or 2 years old. I could do the same. And I did this. Perfect example. I've got a fly flying around here. So if you see me ducking and moving, it's because there is a fly in here and it's driving me crazy. It's on my light over there, and sometimes it comes right from my forehead. So I did this with a guppy video. I did a perfectly adequate guppy care and breeding video, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. And I noticed, oh my gosh, this thing is getting almost no views. And for guppies, one of the most popular fish on the face of the earth. And for me doing species profiles, this should be a leading contender. When you type in guppy care, it should be popping up on the first page. I redid the video. The thing is done much, much better. I'm going to have to go back and redo some of those videos I did 6, 7 years ago when I first started, just because either it's human nature or something that YouTube does where it's like, okay, this video is older. I'm going to prioritize the newer videos, and your video is getting buried. And so that actually, for a user, for someone who's consuming videos, it gets a little frustrating because it's almost like watching a rerun of something that was done. Maybe the audio is a little bit better. Maybe the video, the B-roll is better, but the subject is the same, right? Now you're seeing, okay, I just contributed video 946 to this subject, even though I actually did video number 7 that ever came out on the subject. That's why you see that. And that leads to a cluttered experience on YouTube, I would say.
Yeah, I've done the exact same thing, and it's the main reason why. Sure, yeah, that video did really well. I want to remake it and hopefully have the same success. There is that angle to it, but also a perfect example. The second most watched video on the KG Tropicals channel is 10 Things You Should Know About Betas. I believe the title is Don't Buy a Beta, or as you say, the proper way, beta, without watching this video first. I think it's our second most watched video. The other reason why Lisa and I want to remake that video is because our list would be very different now than it was 5 years ago when we made that video. It's not that the information is different, but we've learned more, we've experienced more. There's new things, there's new products, there's new this, new that. It will be a completely different video, but with the same concept. And better video quality, better audio quality, all of that too. So yeah, I mean, and that's at some point when you have 1,000 videos on your channel like I do, you kind of have to start back at ground zero and start over again because there's only so many things you can talk about.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, like we've been mentioning, has YouTube made fish keeping better? Yes. The information is out there. Is it overwhelming sometimes? Absolutely. That is a downside. Are you getting established YouTube creators creating more content that seems like the content has been repeated? Yes, but understand too that in some cases that's not the creator just running out of ideas. It's the creator saying, hey, the way that YouTube prioritizes videos, the way that they push channels is when you have fresh content out there that is newer, that is something that people are going to be more interested in. YouTube can be there's a lot of creators that were out there when I started watching fish videos, when you started watching fish videos, that are done. They're gone. And you see this YouTube, I'm burned out. Usually it starts with are doing all the videos and having all the fun and everything's working great. And then you start to see them post a little bit less often. And maybe the energy level's not quite as what it used to be. And then you start to see, hey guys, sorry, I haven't posted in a couple of weeks, but I'm back. And they have like 16 comebacks. And then finally they just fall off the face of the earth because it is a grueling process. There's a reason why on TV, the best of the best of the best TV shows out there. I'm talking about Seinfeld and Friends and ER and they go about 10 years.
Yep.
And that's about all you can get out of them. Why is that? It's not because people hate the show. It's not because they've instantly forgotten how to act. It's because for that situation and that universe that they've built, whether it's Seinfeld or Friends, they've run out of ideas. They're just done. They've explored all the things that they can explore with the group of people they have. And you might find a brand new show that's very similar to the one that just went off the air, but now it's fresh, right? And what we have to do as creators and what makes it an interesting experience for everybody who's watching is how do we stay relevant 15 years later or 10 years later and still be able to bring value. And then if you've got a lot of people doing that, that creates a little bit of redundancy.
Yeah, the two best examples of what you were just talking about, Seinfeld, I'm glad you brought up because I'm the biggest Seinfeld fan, but that's a great example of just at the peak of the show's success. Okay, that's it. We're done. And bailing out. The example of the opposite is The Walking Dead.
Oh my gosh,
That's
great example.
where you have a great show, great concept, but after like 7 or 8 seasons, it got to the point where there's nothing left. And there's not it's the same thing over and over and over. And they went on with that show like 4 seasons too long. And it just got to the point where nobody was watching it anymore because you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you have to switch things up in a big way and maybe present it from a different angle. I don't mean camera angle, but a different approach to a topic. The word you used, it makes sense, is relevant. To stay relevant, you have to be able to adapt, and if you don't, then you might be better off doing what Breaking Bad did and Sopranos did and Seinfeld and just bail out when you're on top. I don't want to see any YouTubers quit. We've got so many people that I call friends that are just no longer in it because they did realize, okay, if I want to do this and I want it to be my job, it's more than just picking up the phone. Hey guys, it's a whole lot more than that. And it just becomes too much.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff that has to happen. Some people, I know that you have a different methodology that probably takes longer than maybe it does for me when you're prepping for your videos and stuff with you and Lisa, and the editing process and all of that stuff. And I will say this because there's a different way you can approach this. How has YouTube impacted the hobby? And that is, if you are someone who creates videos and puts them on social media, and you don't have to be a YouTuber, you could be somebody who posts on Facebook or Instagram, little snippets, 10-second snippets of your videos, do a little reel, a TikTok upload. That makes you a creator in some sense. It can begin to have an impact on how you keep fish. And I am not immune to this. I'm sure you're not either, but there are decisions that you make in the hobby that may not be the decisions you make if you were just enjoying the hobby. Like, for instance, I would love to have a 125-gallon tank just packed with platies. That's it. Platies and Corys. Just give me a platy Cory 125-gallon. I actually thought about it with these gallery tanks, and I'm like, there is no way that I can waste, even with 4 125s in our on the 2 on the fish room side, 2 on the gallery side, that I can waste a 125 putting platies in there. The real estate in the gallery is too valuable for that. Where if it was just me, maybe that's what I would do. And for those of you who are posting stuff, you got to be really careful, because this happens to a lot of creators. Because not only do those creators leave YouTube, they wind up leaving the hobby altogether. You got to be so careful when you start to put stuff on a social media platform. There's an element, yes, it becomes a job, but to what extent? Does it become such a job that it ruins the hobby? Because once the hobby is ruined, now you're stuck with a job that may be miserable, doing a hobby that used to bring you enjoyment, and now it's just unbearable. And I've seen some creators where that's exactly what happened to them.
We're going to do an episode right after this one talking about when does it become too much. That's the other thing that happens with a lot of creators is, okay, I've done this tank and it got some views. What do I do now? Well, I got to set up another tank, and next thing you know, they've got 62 tanks, and they've set them all up because they want to get the views on YouTube. And I understand it, because it's the game that we play. I understand how that can happen. This is the one thing that I have no issue whatsoever tooting my own horn on, and my wife's horn. We do not fall victim to what you're talking about. I'm the guy that has almost everyone's dream aquarium, a 360 gallon. What did I do? I put 3 Oscars in it. There's not a lot of people that would do that, because they would look at Oscars as being, well, that's a dumb fish. I want to get something that's going to be more awe-inspiring and play better on YouTube. Let me tell you something. They've done just fine in that tank for me. They've kind of become my staple thing. And a very recent example of that is Lisa putting goldfish in her new tank. I mean, she said something about it, like she was going to put frontosas in there, and then she was like, you know what? I just don't feel that. I want to put goldfish in there. Like, is that going to be okay? I'm like, are you crazy? Of course that's okay, because that's what you want to do. That's special for you. There is a certain, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, relief in that. Like, I'm doing this because it's what I want to do, because it's going to make me happy or make my wife happy. I don't care whether the people on social media like it or not. It just so happens that they do like it, and so that's a bonus. But it's definitely a relief to not have that pressure of, well, I have to make a decision based on what the YouTube algorithm is going to like. It's so hard not to fall into that trap. I've been in that trap before, but when you get away from that, it's a huge relief.
And you brought up a really excellent point, and that is perhaps one of the largest impacts that YouTube has had on just the fish keeping hobby in general. And that is exactly what you saw, or what you said: people watching creators add the next tank, add the next tank, add the next tank. And it becomes normalized in a sense, where if you're really just in this hobby and you're watching people who have fish rooms like we do, it becomes normal to see people with 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 100 aquariums and thinking, they look happy, I want that. When you're not necessarily, as a viewer, understanding the work that goes in behind all that, understanding that there is a payback for them and for me, right? When we had 80 tanks up here in the fish room, between this side, it's now the gallery, and the other side, there is a certain element where there's a payoff there, where for the average hobbyist, listen, I've been very honest and open. I do not maintain my aquariums. I've got 2 boys. They're almost 20 years old and 16. They have been maintaining these aquariums exclusively for at least the last 5 or 6 years. And I did very little even before that. So they learned at a young age how to properly maintain the aquariums. If these aquariums look good behind me, is because Luke does this side and he's taking care of it. I don't. The only thing I may do is maybe if a plant comes up, I might push that down, or there's a little streak on the front of the glass, I might wipe that off. I touch none of these things. And the last thing I want, I mention this, and I do mention it periodically because I don't want people thinking that, oh, you know what, on the other side where I have the fish room and I still have 35 aquariums up and running there, that I somehow have the time to work a full-time job, do YouTube and all the family responsibilities, enjoy other parts of my life. And oh, yeah, you know what? I just go ahead and maintain these aquariums every week. I don't. My boys do it and I pay them. I pay them well. They are employees of Primetime Aquatics. They get paid a decent wage to go and maintain these aquariums every week. And if I had to do it, it would be overwhelming, something that we're going to address in the next video, but it's part of the reason why we'll address it in the next podcast, why the gallery is the gallery and no longer part of the fish room. So be careful there, because YouTube, one of the detrimental things that it can do is normalize having dozens upon dozens of aquariums. And then when you try it, you realize, oh boy, there's a disconnect here.
It's become a job. It's not as fun anymore because and I can't wait to talk about that in the next episode, because I got a lot to say about that. I want to bring up one thing too about future creators. Another thing that I get, you talked about fancier cameras and fancier audio equipment and stuff like that. You don't have to do that. Everybody's walking around with a really, really good camera in their pocket. I mean, 99% of the people are walking around with something that will be perfectly adequate or even beyond adequate for what is acceptable on YouTube. In fact, you'll be putting out stuff that's better than what I do, because I upload all my stuff in 1080p. I have a camera that I'm talking to you on right now that's perfectly capable of handling 4K. I don't do it. Why? Because it doesn't really matter. I upload it in 1080p. It doesn't have to be the fanciest. And there's two examples of this that are no better than anybody else, or no better than any other examples that are better than any other examples. I'm sorry, I'm not talking properly. One channel I know for a fact, Jason, you've probably seen, and the other you probably haven't, because you're a good person and you wouldn't watch a channel like this. Scotty Kilmer.
Oh,
and a channel by the name of Moist Critical. Moist Critical is a channel that I'm saying you probably have never seen before. This is a guy that's always wearing the same shirt. He has whatever in the background. He just sits in front of the camera and talks about it. Talks about whatever he wants to talk about. He's got like 16 million subscribers and gets like 100 million views a month. He's light years ahead of anybody that will ever be in the fish keeping world. He's not doing anything fancy. He doesn't have fancy editors. He doesn't have all of this fancy stuff. It's because what he's talking about is valuable. That's where the people get their value, not from his audio or video quality. And Scotty Kilmer, I think, is the best example of that. Anybody that has ever watched an automotive video on YouTube, the old guy that says, "Rev up your engines," that's Scotty Kilmer. The most basic editing you've ever seen. He just stands there and talks with his hands, but he's the most animated, easiest person in the world to listen to. He's not doing anything fancy. There's no fancy editing. In fact, I think he does his own editing, and he's a multimillionaire from YouTube. You do not have to have fancy stuff, fancy editing, fancy tricks. You don't have to jump off of roofs and slide down water slides. You can just keep it basic, give good information. You'd be surprised how far that will get you. You might not be Mr. Beast or Aquarium Info, but your channel will definitely have value and can take you a long way.
Yeah. Provided that you are offering that value in a unique way, and you're not just the 700th video on the same subject doing most of the same thing.
Right.
You mentioned it earlier, the bro science, which I like to call the bro science. You hear somebody say something who might have a background in that, and then everybody repeats it. The worst possible scenario is when somebody thinks they've heard an expert in their field say something, then repeat it, but not understand the nuances of what was said from the original video. And then that just gets repeated and repeated. And pretty soon it becomes fact, when when in reality, it's not fact for all situations. It was fact for just one situation. And now it's spread as gospel. And you see that all the time, not just on the YouTube side, because we could talk about Facebook and Instagram. And that is one. I don't know if we had that on our list, but you might want to put it down there. Um, how Facebook and Instagram has influenced the hobby, because there I have a lot fewer nice things to say about those social media platforms. I think YouTube is a legitimately very solid source for information, provided you know how to sift through it. But those other platforms can be even worse, and that's where the bro science and the repeating and all that stuff gets 100 million times worse.
Yep. And the the best advice for the YouTube user, not the content creator, but the YouTube user, is find that person that you trust. A great example would be the guy right here on my camera next to me. Jason is a guy that you could connect with, you trust. You trust because of his background, you trust because of his education, because of the way that he presents things. And that can be your guy that becomes your go-to for that information. I'll give you a great example of this for me. Nothing to do with fish keeping. Are you familiar with the gentleman Norm Abram? Do you know the name Norm Abram?
I know the
He's
name.
the
I think I know the name. I don't know why I know the name though.
he's the guy that Al from Home Improvement was kind of modeled after. He was on This Old House. Then he has the show New Yankee Workshop. He is, I'm sorry because I know you're a religious man, he is a god on earth to me. This is a guy that no matter what he says, that is the truth to me. Why? Because for 30 years, I've been watching this man on television shows talk to me about woodworking and home renovations and everything else. Now, there's nobody on YouTube that you can connect with yet for 30 years, so you're not going to be able to develop that. But when you have that kind of a connection with somebody, that's where you're going to get your best information. It's that person that you trust because the information that they've given you in the past has worked out and because it makes sense because of the way they're delivering it. Jason, you're a pro at that. That's why I keep bringing you up. I'm not trying to butter you up, but explaining information in a good, easy, concise, easy to follow way, and it's coming from somebody that you trust, that is YouTube gold as far as I'm concerned.
Well, what's interesting too about YouTube is I'll go back to the motorcycle example. There's this guy, Kevin Baxter. He doesn't have the biggest channel in the world, but he was the one I was talking about he's an engineer. He's got his own shop. He's been breaking down engines, rebuilding them for 30 years. And when he talks about something, in my mind, there is no greater authority. So when I need something, that's the first channel I check. Whatever he says goes, because you could take the next 5 creators in the motorcycle space, put them together, and I don't think they have the experience at the level that he does. You and I have talked a lot about this at Aquashellas because it's a good reminder for us, and you get it a lot too. And thank you for that, by the way. You get it a lot as well. And that is when somebody comes to you and says, you're the go-to channel when I need something, that has a massive impact on you. It has a massive impact on me. We've talked about it a lot at these Aquashellas, and when it's all said and done and it's midnight, we're just sitting around having a Coke and just talking shop. That is a tremendous responsibility. And that's how I know you view it. It's how I view it. It's more than just let's put out some content and offer advice. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking about those comments, and I know you are too. When someone's telling you KG Tropicals is my go-to channel, that's an enormous responsibility. And hopefully for you for those of you who are viewers, the people that you're watching understand that incredible weight, because it is a hefty, in a sense, burden to carry when someone's telling you, hey, if something is going on in the hobby, I'm going to your channel to try to figure it out. Man, you better be on your game, and you better think about that every time you hit play and every time you hit upload.
It helps me because it makes me stay on top of my game. Like, oh, I don't think I want to say that thing because, like you said, it's a lot of responsibility, and I love it. I mean, that's an amazing thing for me. I take that, and it's the best thing I could ever hear from anybody. And we hear it. You and I hear it. We stand there next to each other. It's over and over and over again. It's KG Tropicals. It's Primetime Aquatics. Usually, the conversation is, I watch 3 channels religiously. It's KG Tropicals, Primetime Aquatics, and Aquarium Co-op. It's like those
Yep.
3 were always linked together, and you hear that over and over and over again. And I'm going to tell you something. I could hear it 33 million times, and it'll never get old. But it
Nope. And
is a big responsibility. I welcome it, though. I love it.
yeah. And whenever I'm included in those, in that group of creators, I'm like, wow, that's an honor. That truly is. So,
Mm-hmm.
and to all of you, thank you, because without you being here, there's no reason to do this stuff. And, I know a lot of creators sometimes will say, oh, I don't care if anybody watches it. I just like to post it. That's not true. And
You're
I
lying.
promise you 100% of the time, that's not true. When you really think about it, the only reason why anybody posts anything to any social media, I don't care if it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, is because you want to share. And the whole idea of sharing is to have other people engage in it, watch it, enjoy it, be entertained or educated. That is the only reason to put stuff on social media. If we really truly don't care about people watching stuff, then we just wouldn't put it on social media, because we just wouldn't care. It'd just be for us. So,
That's right.
but do you have anything else you'd like to add to our conversation?
No, I mean, there's only one thing I've kind of waited for the right opportunity to bring up. I'll just talk about it very quickly. As far as one of the biggest positives that there is on YouTube, I've been there and seen somebody say this to you too. It always blows my mind when I get somebody that comes to me in person and says, you know what? I don't know how it happened, but somehow one of your videos was recommended to me on YouTube. I've never had aquariums, or I had never had aquariums before. I didn't have any interest in it, but for some reason YouTube thought that I might want to watch one of your videos. I watched it, and now I have 9 aquariums.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest compliment that I've ever received. But this isn't about me and what I think is a compliment. That's a tremendous positive for this hobby, is that there is that idea that randomly sometime somebody can watch one of our videos and be inspired to actually get into this hobby. There's no better scenario in the world than that for me. So that's huge. Thank you for letting me say that. And that's, to me, one of the biggest positives of YouTube as a whole.
And not only that, but think about where they're saying that. Usually it's at an aquashella or some type of event. So not only does somebody get into the hobby, but it's the community aspect. And I'm really surprised we haven't addressed that before the end of this podcast. And that is the community side of YouTube. Not necessarily, it's not the same as Facebook where you're interacting and, leaving comments back and forth. Although I do see that in comments sections, but it's the ability to learn about a hobby, but then also learn about all of the social gatherings, whether it's an aquashella or an American Cichlid Association thing or something like that. And that can build community. And that, even when people don't necessarily have a lot of family around them, a lot of support around them, maybe not a lot of friends where they live, there's still that community aspect in your live streams and my live streams, and people interacting and having conversations. And that can be a nice little getaway for an evening too. So
absolutely.
But everybody, thank you so much. I'm glad you were here. Thanks for being here. We got to talk a little bit about, want to hear from you again in the comments section below. What do you think? Do you think YouTube has helped? Has it hurt? What are your most favorite things about YouTube? What are the things you dislike the most? We will be back same time, same place next week. We've got a real good one for you. John's got a great subject. Hope to see you there. We'll see you next week.